Next up, we have a presentation from Altech Chemicals with the ticker code ATC. To tell us more about their high purity alumina projects, I will now hand you over to Managing Director, Iggy Tan. Hello, Iggy.
Good morning. How are you?
Very well. Great to have you back on Broker Briefing.
Thank you for having me.
I'll let you jump into it.
Thank you very much. So thank you, everyone. Altech Chemicals is an Australian company listed on the ASX. And I guess we're going to talk a bit about the future of lithium-ion batteries. And in Tesla's recent battery day, they announced the objective of halving the cost of their battery production to be below 100 kilowatts an hour. And also they announced their 4680 cells. But what's interesting about their last battery day, Elon Musk talked about the future use of silicon in their anodes. And I want to talk a bit about the silicon, the future of silicon and how our technology can help that in batteries. What a lot of people don't realize, this is a lithium-ion battery. On the first charge of a lithium-ion battery, all the lithium ions go from the cathode to the anode. And what a lot of people don't realize, that 10% of the lithium stays on the anode after the first discharge. So imagine that 10% of your lithium inventory is lost to the battery. And essentially what it does, it forms an SCI layer around the graphite particles and it becomes inactive to the battery. So this is a major problem facing the lithium battery industry. And what happens during the life of the battery is that the SCI layer cracks, it exposes new sites and more lithium is absorbed. And also hydrofluoric ions in the electrolyte breaks the SCI layer, exposes new sites, and then more lithium is absorbed. So there's a continual consumption of lithium during the operation of the battery. And there's a lot of research that shows that high purity alumina coating around the graphite particles resolves this first cycle loss problem. It improves the life of the battery, fast charging capability, and also the safety of the battery or thermal runaway. This is an example of some of the research that shows coated graphite versus uncoated graphite. And after 200 cycles, you can see that the coated graphite has 10% more energy capacity than the uncoated graphite. Now, I mentioned about the safety side. This is an example of research that shows on the left-hand side is non-coated graphite battery, and they do a nail penetration test. And you can see the battery catches the light, a temperature source of 600 degrees. But on the right-hand side is coated graphite, and the temperature only gets up to 100 degrees, and you can see the picture of the batteries remains intact. Now, there are three ways of coating alumina on graphite: the vapor method, the solid method, and the liquid method. They tend to be quite expensive ways, but essentially our process is a liquid method of coating alumina onto graphite. Now, our 2 nanometer alumina coating is game-changing technology. We can coat the graphite material with a 2 nanometer layer, and that prevents the first cycle loss capacity. Essentially, it pre-coats the graphite and it stops lithium from absorbing onto the first cycle loss or the SCI layer. We've now gone into half cell battery performance tests, and it shows very promising results. So our process is a much cheaper and easy way to commercialize. And what we're aiming for when we coat the graphite material is an extension of the life of the battery. Essentially, you've got 10% more lithium ions in the battery to use during the life of that. And this is some of our technology under a microscope. On the left-hand side is a graphite particle, and you can see that 2 nanometers thin layer of graphite, very efficient technology. As on the right-hand side, this is what the industry is trying to do, very thick, irregular coatings around the graphite. Now let's talk about silicon. Silicon has 10 times the capacity of graphite. As Tesla says, this is a very promising anode material. Now, if it's this promising, why isn't silicon used in lithium-ion batteries today? Essentially, there are three major problems. Firstly, the silicon expands 300% in volume compared to carbon, which is only 13%, and it fractures. Number two is that the first cycle loss, instead of 10% like graphite, is probably closer to 50%. So essentially, there's so much sites that it can absorb lithium on, it takes out 50% of the lithium inventory. And thirdly, it's got a higher fade during the life of the battery. Now, just to give you an idea of the capacity of silicon to hold lithium, on the left-hand side, you need 6 carbon atoms to hold 1 lithium ion. On the right-hand side, it shows that you only need 1 silicon atom to hold 4 lithium ions. Now, if this was the anode material of a graphite battery, if you can put some silicon particles in there, this is how much lithium that battery can hold. So you can see visually that the energy density of the batteries increase significantly by adding silicon into the batteries. Now, I mentioned the problems with it. Silicon swells and fractures, and in the anode, it creates delamination, which is a big problem for lithium batteries because they swell so much. Now, the question is, can somebody crack the silicon code? Well, essentially, we've done our laboratory tests. We've managed to coat silicon particles with a very thin layer of alumina. And we believe that our alumina can contain the fracture of the silicon and also reduce that first cycle loss. All our technology is developed within Australia in our laboratories in Perth. And we have so far shown very positive results with coated silicon performance over non-coated silicon performance. And there is still further work to be done, but very encouraging results so far. We have a collaboration agreement with 2 large groups, SGL Carbon, which is one of the largest graphite producers in the world, and also Ferroglobe. As I mentioned, we're not a research and development company. We have a strong focus on commercializing our Alumina technology. And so consequently, we have commenced a pre-feasibility study for a battery materials project in Germany. Saxony is the state where a lot of the EV manufacturing has been planned, battery plants and so on. And this plant will produce 10,000 tons per annum of battery materials, essentially taking graphite material, taking silicon material, coating it with our Alumina technology, putting it together and selling into the lithium-ion batteries in Europe. We've also announced today that we've established the green credentials for this project. It reduces the CO2 content in batteries significantly, and we are now in the process of getting this project accredited with a very international group called Cicero out of Norway. Now, so the question is, why are we focused in Europe or Germany? Why are we building this project? And this is the site that we have in Saxony. On the right-hand side is our site. The reason we're focused in Europe is really about the auto industry. So let me go to this next slide. We believe the story of the lithium-ion battery will be about Europe in the next decade. I guess it's fair to say in the previous decades is about China, Japan, and Korea. And the reason the story will be Europe is essentially driven by CO2 emission standards by the EU. So all car manufacturers need to achieve less than 95 grams per kilometer in CO2 emissions. And that's why you see all the European car manufacturers having to go to all electric by 2033. And so if you look at the next slide here, these are all the car manufacturers that have announced all electric by 2030. And you can see how much money they're putting in to the electrification of their fleet. So in Europe, you won't be able to buy any ICE vehicles. And I think UK has also announced that. Now, our technology, if you look back here, what is the impact of that to the retail market? If you have a Model 3 with 0 silicon, it travels about 423 kilometers on a single charge. Now, if you are able to add 10% silicon in that battery, you'll be able to travel 680 Ks on a single charge. 20% will get you 940 Ks, and 30% silicon will allow you to travel nearly 1,200 Ks on a single charge. Now, what the battery, the EV manufacturers will still give you around the 400, 500 kilometers because you're traveling around the city. And what it will allow them is to downsize the size of the battery and the weight of the cars. So we're very focused on Europe. That's the big change. And so consequently, some 600 gigawatts of battery capacity have been announced in Europe. And what the EU has said, that they don't want to rely on materials coming from Asia. They want to be self-reliant on battery capacity and all the raw materials. And that's why we're very focused on our battery materials plan in Europe. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for the great presentation, as always. We've had quite a few questions come through. I'll try and get to as many as I can. So when do you expect ATC to be in a position to show the battery cycling for the HPA-coated silicon and graphite batteries?
Yeah, we have been doing a lot of work in the laboratory. We're very close to the breakthroughs. But meanwhile, we are progressing with the commercial side and the pre-feasibility study of the battery materials plant.
Wonderful. And can you please elaborate on the company's commercialization strategy? Do you foresee doing this with the JV partner, etc.?
Yes, I mentioned some of the collaboration partners, and obviously we've got a lot of interest out of Europe. We've got NDA signed up with 2 German automakers and also a battery company. So a lot of interest with the technology, and we're working with some world-class partners.
Well, thank you for that, Iggy. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today. Again, I will encourage webinar attendees to reach out to Iggy via the contact details on the bottom of his ASX releases. But thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.